use it to get into the CC office.
It was a whole different song.
They're just speaking to me, giving me like revelation.
Alright. Hi everyone. It's so good to see so many new people here. I'm really excited for that. This is the third lecture in the lecture series that I'm running out of 679 daily. I hope that everyone in this room will lecture at some point. And we don't have... Yes.
It's so doable.
It's fantastic. There will be a video. You can put it on your CV. I don't know if that's the way to get to people. But I'm going next week. I'll be presenting a lecture on art and imitation. And I don't have lectures set up after that for a couple of weeks. So if you have an idea and are brave enough to take a stab at it, I welcome you. And with that, please listen to my very good friend, Brooke Ortiz.
Thank you very, very much for having me. Also, I wanted to add, make sure you guys are on the mailing list for this sort of session. There's no Instagram account or anything like that. I'll probably try to make one and help you out with that.
It's time. It's time to promote.
It's outreach is important. But in any case, my name is Brooke Ortiz. This is my lecture on sainthood and popehood, specifically through the Catholic Church. There are all sorts of kinds of different Catholic faiths, and they all have their own, sometimes some of them have their own systems of saints and stuff like that. But I kind of wanted to focus in on the specific structure concerning how does a person become a saint? How does a person become a pope? We understand both of these as these two very far-flung concepts, but popes and saints are not floating heads. They're people who lived lives, and they, in different ways, devoted themselves to this institution. And this institution comprises of human beings who trace an apostolic legacy towards the original apostles of Jesus Christ. But low-key, even if you didn't believe in God, you could become a saint. And low-key, if you didn't believe in God, you could become a pope. And I think once you start approaching it from that angle, it opens up a really interesting line of interrogation into what does it mean to be a pope? What does it mean to be a saint? We can go to the next slide because it's kind of this broad outline that I was going for. But you absolutely could be a pope. It's something that there's only one, so it makes it harder, but there's only 8 billion people. Anyone can get baptized, anyone can rise through the ranks, and I'm going to talk about that. We're still in college. People go to seminary after they graduate typically. So, there's still hope for you. There's still hope for you. And then you can also be a saint. You just can't live. You just have to die. That's step one. You have to make sure you die well, and you have to make sure you live well first. But requisite is death. So that's just sign the waiver on that if you'd like to become a saint. But it's also doable. There's way more saints. We'll get into it. Basically, Catholic Church and anyone who devoted themselves to Jesus Christ, this kind of errant Jewish rabbi in around 0 BC, anyone who decided that they wanted to follow him, it was a heretical belief, and it was a group of people who decided that this person was the Savior and the Son of Man, and decided to dedicate their lives to him for reasons known only to them and to God. But for as long as there have been Christians and people who, since he was crucified, for as long as there has been Jesus, there have been people who have been getting killed for saying that he was awesome. So the original saints were basically all martyrs, people who were told to reject Jesus and they refused. And these are the most easiest saints to document because a trial and a martyrdom is usually conducted by the state, the Roman state, usually at around the time of briefly after Christ's death. It was the Roman Empire that had made Christianity illegal. So usually it was them doing it, and it was very public. There were these, this specific instance, I don't even know the historical context for it, but it was around this time that a lot of saints, they can be seen here praying in the face of a line that's already been released on them, like judgment has already been cast, but even in that, they're not trying to save themselves or run away. And that's kind of what makes a martyr, is that ultimate profession at the end. And early on with like verifying and collecting like who was a saint and who wasn't. It was like the metropolitan bishops local to the saint that was they were kind of initiating this inquiry into like, was this person a martyr? But it's easy to just like ask the guy next to you who caught the last execution and be like, yeah, did he say Christ was king at the end? And they'd just be like, yeah, and that'd make you a martyr. But that original question for verifying martyrs was just like, is there enough evidence of this person having lived and died in a holy manner to warrant them having an altar set up at their grave? Of just like, is this person worth praying to? Is this person even in heaven? Is this a person who's lived before me who can give me guidance in like an existence that is very confusing or aimless or dangerous, or there's persecution for me being the person that I am? So alien to the Catholicism of today, like no one is getting killed for being Catholic in Western America, but or the Western world and beyond, largely, but that's just because there have been so many successful martyrs as just evidence of the Christian institution. Next slide. So yeah, it would be originally this like episcopal declaration, and these local cultists, so they would be the people around you, or you may know someone who's like, maybe your parents lived at the same time as the saint, and there would be these local cultists of adoration towards specific people who died in a pious way. But then at around 993 AD, we're skipping ahead in time a very long time. It was the first pope that canonized a saint, and it was this guy, Ulrich, Bishop of Augsburg, and his attributes that he's always depicted in is this fish that like he gives it to people. I didn't look into the backstory, but he gives this goose-like to people, and on Friday it turns into a fish. I don't know what that's about, but that's just like every saint has these attributes that are part of how they existed in the world and things that they're purported to have done. The last bishop saint was this guy Walter of Pontoise, but after that, Pope Alexander in the late 12th century, he was like etiamse per eam miracula plurum affierunt, which means even if many miracles are done through him, he's not a saint unless the Pope says he's a saint. There was this guy who's like a total drunk, but a bishop had decided that he was a saint, and the Pope just decided to nullify it, and he set out this doctrine that like totally canceled out that Episcopal saint, and it sent a lot of saints kind of into limbo of like, are they martyred or not? So there's a process for dealing with that, but that's like later on in the church. Beatification, whether people could become blessed by having like an episcopal, which is like a bishop declaration, that was contested until the late 17th century, but that's like a lower distinction beneath saint that I haven't gotten to yet, but I'll get to it. A miracle is a sign that's attributable only to divine power. There's this idea that people consider miracles, at least in, the Catholic doctrine, it's not something that saints themselves are doing magically, it's something that's done through them. So there's this use of the instrumental ablative of just like, he's having it done through him, like and the only person that's not true for it is Christ, because he actually pulled a bunch of fish and bread out of a hat and fed the masses. And miracles like that couldn't be explained through regular natural means. That makes me, some Protestants say that like the miracles that Jesus did in the Bible and miracles that saints do are like metaphors for some sort of holy presence or existence. But Catholicism is more fun because we think that like saints, like a bunch of people who lived, they actually did or had magical things done through them, these actual miracles. Most common miracle that happens is transubstantiation, and it happens every Sunday when the Catholic priest consecrates the water. I'm not doing this on purpose. Yeah, next slide.
Dude, that's
Like, what the fuck? Okay, so one big kind of asterisk about consubstantiation is that the alcohol content rate can't be higher than 18%. Otherwise, it's like not a valid transubstantiation. Yeah. I don't know if it's like Jesus's like alcohol blood content gets too but that's just a real thing. Also, I think that this is crazy. It's weird to see it commodified like that. I just think it's funny. I just want you to say. I'll talk more about that kind of stuff, but not meaningfully. What's up?
What is pre-filled? How is it pre-filled?
There's a little bit of wine in there, but it's like it says wafer with juice. So I don't know if there's like a negligible amount of
That's
alcohol.
the Protestant way. We don't do alcohol, we do juice. So,
You really?
yeah.
Dude.
Protestants, I go to a Methodist church when I'm home, and
Yeah.
like Methodists, they don't do wine, they just
Yeah.
do grape juice because of people like struggling with alcohol addiction.
They need to find
children?
Like,
no children?
what?
Children?
No, alcohol addiction.
Children.
Right, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's like a gray area, but it doesn't really matter. But Italian parents love giving their kids wine. We can go to the next one.
In the Balkans, illegal social.
So with the path to sainthood, there were a bunch of reforms that were done in the 1970s by, I forget the guy, but it's shown later, and to kind of standardize the pathway towards official canonization of saints. It's a 4-step program. We'll start with step 1. Service day, servant of God. It means this inquiry is started typically by the bishop, usually of the priest's hometown. They call an inquiry into like how holy was the life this person lived. Sometimes it's an actual inquiry, sometimes it's pro forma, which is just like they're kind of saying that they're inquiring just to like check off this requirement or whatever. But someone starts a biography on the person's life, interviews all the people that knew them in life. Usually service day is given like 5 years after the person dies, but the Pope can decide to like expedite it. There's no known recorded official quantity of like how many service day are there. Usually the Pope officially acknowledges like 5 to 20 every single year. But one thing is that servants of God like Benedict VIII cannot have public statements made advocating for their like canonization or anything like that. So he's kind of in this sort of purgatory where he can't really be talked about in masses. In his case, he's kind of on the back burner. Next one. Not to be I don't know what that was. Not to be confused with servant of the servants of God, which is an official declaration, or sorry, it's an official designation of the Pope. You only have one servant of the servants of God. The kind of origin of this was this guy, the Archbishop of Constantinople. He called himself the Ecumenical Patriarch. And Gregory I was like so mad about that, and he said that he was like second only to the devil for trying to give himself such a like pompous name or whatever. So as a sort of humility one-upmanship, Gregory I was the first to adopt the name servant of the servants of God. Next slide. But then he's like, that guy is venerated in the Russian Orthodox Church, and he is considered the first ecumenical patriarch of the Orthodox faith. So, last laugh in the end. I think more on the servants of God's. You're assigned a postulator who kind of looks into your works and like makes a case for canonization. But there also used to be a guy called the Advocatus Diaboli, which literally translates to devil's advocate. But the English name for it is promoter of the faith. But he argues against, it's like kind of not officially not a thing anymore, but the reforms in the 70s made him like not have an active role in like the inquiry process, just to make it less adversarial. But technically, if one guy like really wanted to just be like, no. Next slide. More on the different kinds of virtues. When you get to the next level, which is venerable, you kind of get to have people start talking about you. People can start printing out little prayer cards telling people to pray for you and to you after death, because enough proof was found that you lived your life virtuously. There are these 3 theological, again, instrumental sort of virtues, faith, which is like unwavering faith in God, hope in like relationship to salvation, and then charity, which is like pure love for other people. But all of those, again, are done through you, and the existence of you having done them is supposedly proof of like divine presence or some sort of faith in you. And then you have this weird sort of alchemy where these four personal virtues, but like they're additive. So prudence is hope plus charity, and then temperance is faith plus charity, and then justice is faith plus hope, and then fortitude is all three.
Who came up with it?
I-
That's crazy.
It's bullshit. I don't know. But yeah, one more thing is that people can start doing what I could call phone banking, is start praying for miracles, praying for God to intercede in your name. Basically, if you're a dead person who's like venerable, people can start praying to you, and if miracles start happening, everyone's like, whoa. Okay, this might be a thing we're dealing with. I don't know guys, but next slide. And then we're blessed. And now we know that the person is in heaven. So with venerable people and servants of God, we're not even sure if they're in heaven or not. But with these people, they've done at least one miracle usually. So this is like our kind of upper bound of like who we know for sure is in heaven. Because we don't really know where Thomas like cuts out the threshold of like how good or how bad do you have to be. Yeah, please.
When you say miracles, does that mean in your lifetime or like post?
Afterwards too, I'll get more into like the recent canonization process. Like people that have lived in our lifetimes, all of their miracles are post-mortem. What's that?
So you said that there's like two lines of like
Yeah.
who's good enough for heaven. Does that mean that there's people who are too good for heaven?
No, I just mean like a threshold of like who gets in and who doesn't. We don't know where like Thomas draws the line with kids or whatever. At this point, even though the 50% people were venerable, these people are venerated, so you can actually start praying to them because you know that they're like in heaven. So, you know, if you pray to someone but they're like actually in hell, that's like really bad juju. I don't know. So we want to be sure before we start praying to anyone. There are thousands recorded in the martyrologies that are kind of compendiums of all the martyrs, all the saints, all the blesseds that exist in like the Roman canon. Kind of as many blesseds as saints, really. But it's all very vague. If there are kind of two different kinds, there are martyrs and then there are confessors. But for martyrs, the Pope only needs to make an official declaration saying like, yeah, this person was martyred. But like, if you're a confessor and you just lived a pious life, you don't have to die at all. And then you get a feast day if you're blessed. So like an official day of the year where everyone talks about you. A bunch of, these are all the martyr popes, and you can see most of them. This one died in 309. 31 of the first 35 popes all died because it was just like so dangerous to be a pope back then. And the first pope was St. Peter the Apostle. He was crucified upside down. So St. Peter's cross is like the upside down cross. If you ever see that, like Satan is trying to show, it's just like he didn't think that he was worthy of being crucified in the same way that Christ was. So he got crucified upside down. So that's what a martyr is. And then I think this was all like before Constantine made Christianity legal. A martyr of charity is a person who like didn't get killed for their faith, but they died out of like an act of faith originated love. I saw like a crazy article that was written in 2008 during the Iraq War saying that this Navy SEAL should be considered a martyr of charity because he jumped on a grenade, which is kind of crazy. Like I just think that's so ridiculous. Maybe like the martyr of charity thing to do would have been to let the grenade. Never mind. There are a lot of martyrs of charity. There are very few. It's kind of a rare exemption for like considering people martyrs. Sarah Salkahadze was, I think she died because she was sheltering over 100 Jewish people from the Holocaust. And St. Colby was a Franciscan friar who like volunteered to die in the place of another man who was going to be sent to the starvation chambers in Auschwitz. So that's kind of a extra kind of martyr. Martyrs of the faith are like the most common kind. Blesseds are called beati. Confessors are people who they need to have done at least one kind of miracle. It's usually people like pray to the venerable person after death, then they like miraculously recover, and then the medical board has to agree in a supermajority that natural causes couldn't have naturally caused this like spontaneous recovery. It's the easiest kind of miracle because low-key, like, the body kind of heals itself. So it's like, if it's a dubious sort of cause for this miraculous healing, that's usually the way that you want to go. But there are 4 different kinds of miracles. Healing is the most common one that, like, normal saints will do. Exorcism, if you get a demon out. Resurrection, if you, like, make yourself or someone else, like Lazarus is considered a saint because he, like, resurrected. It was proof of his holiness. It was a miracle being acted through him. And then nature, which is just anything that couldn't be explained by the natural forces of nature, walking on water, all that good shit and stuff.
So if like someone claims that you or that somebody got somebody out of a coma,
Yeah.
which one would that fall under?
That's probably going to be healing. I actually don't know what's up.
So is it you're healing yourself, like you're really sick and
You're healing
recover, or
other
you're healing
people, usually other
Okay.
people. So people have prayed for like the most recently venerated saints and most recently canonized saints. It was people praying to him and then just like miraculously like getting their destroyed like pancreas healed miraculously or whatever. And it's like funny to think that you could try to like collect all 4, and if you manage to do all 4, it's something that like only you and Jesus could do. Like if you got just like an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, you get all 4, you're like set. It doesn't make you God or anything, but it means like you're pretty fucking holy. A saint just means that you're experiencing the beatified vision in heaven. So you're seeing God in his face and it's like really awesome and you're having a lot of fun and you're like certified in heaven. You get a patronage, so it's like specific things pertaining to like how and who you were in life, specific objects. Your hometown, usually you have like a certain patronage over. People who are like traversing whatever paths you traversed in life afterwards are going to pray to you, which is pretty cool. And then what there is equivalent canonization for saints that were venerated by bishops and kind of maybe made official, canonized by bishops, and then all of that stuff was made obsolete. It's up to a pope to now kind of look back into the archives of shelf saints and see like who's worth bringing back. 2012, one of my favorites, Hildegard of Bingen, got brought back. Got brought back by Pope Benedict. So. Here's the official breakdown. There are 226 people who have been the Pope. 81 of them are saints. About 1,100 people are like in the official martyrologies, but up to like 11,000 have been canonized at some point or in some dubious level of canonization. Mass canonizations happen when specific like entire towns are wiped out for refusing to like give up their faith to some inquisiting force or whatever. What's that?
Does the 11,000 include like the now like obsolete
Yeah.
canonization
Yeah.
by bishops?
Yeah. And then I kind of have a joke about like all the popes that are saints are martyrs, but not fully. What's up?
Why are the 1100 and the 11,000 French?
Just like it's this fucking football team. Symbol for a saint because there isn't really like a crest for saint as a whole because it's not like a specific
So you use the
position of authority. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, New Orleans.
Lord of the
Saints.
Eve.
Yeah. Saint Stephen was the first proto-martyr. He was born after Christ died. We like heard about him and was like, he's the sickest. And he was the first person to kind of get killed for still saying he was legit, even though we never saw him. Saint Peter the Apostle was told by Jesus, like, you were the rock, you were the guy that like everything is predicated on. And both the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church both looked at him and say like, he's our OG. So there were schisms of around like 1,000, but they both kind of trace to him. I had a slide where I was showing that like of the 12 apostles, every single, there are all these different Catholic churches or Christian churches, the Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, all of these different churches, there's one church who claims as their original predecessor one of the apostles. Many of them claim 2 different apostles as their like main predecessor, but every single apostle has some sort of currently active descendant church. I overheard you talking about like Irish Catholic versus Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic's the institution, like Irish Catholic, Hispanic Catholic are cultural backgrounds. Like Judaism might be both like a religious or like it's also like a cultural background. But there was like kind of a saint before that, and forgive me if this slide is like really cluttered and full of a lot of different things, because I kind of go on a crazy detour here. But Saint Dismas was the guy he was the penitent thief who was right there next to Jesus, and he kind of had nothing to lose, and he was just like, this guy might be my savior. So he was the one that went to bat for him, and I think it's like really cool. He's my favorite saint because he had really nothing to lose, and he had like abyss awaiting him. He was just like, he looked to the guy nearest him, he was just like, I kind of place all of my faith in this guy. So total Hail Mary he threw. It was a total buzzer beater, and it like worked for him. He's considered a saint in the Catholic canon. He bought low, he sold high, like no one believed in Jesus. He did for like no reason. There's this Brazilian rap group that have a lyric about how he's like the first thug life of all time. And I really wanted to look into the etymology of that because they're rapping in Portuguese. They're called the Racional MCs, so like the rational MCs. So it's all about like intellectual history rap. I'm assuming, I didn't look into it that much. But I looked into the origin of the word thug. It comes from the Hindi word thuggi, which means robber, and it kind of got taken into English to mean criminal. And then there was this Shakur, and Tupac Shakur kind of came up with a reclamation of it just like being a sign, thug life being a sign of resistance and independence and stuff. And then it got taken into this like general prescriptive philosophy, which is the thug life. And then it got translated into Portuguese, and it retained that connotation, and it became loca vida, but that means translates to crazy life. So what they were saying was loca life, so I don't know if they were including the etymological connotation of it meaning robber, because Dismas was being crucified for being a robber. I just thought that was really interesting, and it reminded me how like Lil B the bass god, like base was a term to mean like you're super high on free base crack cocaine, and he like reclaimed it to mean like I'm being myself. And he has these lyrics about how like my tiny pants on like a faggot, and I just think no one else is brave enough to rap. I'm allowed to say that.
I did say she could say
positivity and doing whatever I want, and then it got reclaimed by weirdos on the internet, and it meant like crypto-fascist and racist, and then it got reclaimed again. So I just thought that was interesting. Next slide. What's up?
What is this?
Another easy way to become a saint is just be in the Bible. Here are like 100 saints and where they're mentioned in the Bible. Yeah. Might be too late for us, but I feel like I just had this one's highlighted. Because it was highlighted when I screenshotted it because that's my birthday. But if your birthday is on camera, like, shout out. That's like your feast day is on this person's like. Yeah.
Dude,
Wait,
that's my boy.
Why do you get one and I don't?
Mine is I can't even pronounce this fucking guy. Melchizedek. Oh, next slide.
Oh, you don't have one. Dude, so
I went through the history of like saints and stuff. The history of popes is kind of just like the history of the Catholic Church. It was like this very, so I'm gonna like really quickly go through it. It was this very prosecuted faith that these bishops, they had this idea of apostolic succession. So bishops were these kind of shepherds continuing the mission of like whatever Jesus and his apostles' mission was for like salvation and the worship of Christ or whatever. And then there was institutionalization, where once it became legal, they kind of had to codify everything, and they came up with ecumenical councils to really like make everything official or whatever. Isolation period, where like there was sort of a power vacuum in the West, and they kind of took hold as like this. It became increasingly clear that they were political actors in the West, and they very quickly became the most powerful force in the West. If you were going to be a ruler in like Europe, you kind of had to have the blessing of the Pope. The Renaissance, they like were bankrolling because they had so much power, a lot of culture and research and stuff, and the Protestant Reformations, all the Protestants and Martin Luther, and they're like, fuck, the Catholic Church because there's so much corruption and stuff. In Montpelier there was a bunch of corruption. And then up until recently, there have been a lot of, even further, the Second Vatican Council, what we're in is called Vatican II, which is just like it was a major reformation and trying to re-solidify for the modern age, like what a Catholic Church has to look like. There were a lot of more modernizing changes down to how the Catholic Church is run at basically every atomic level. Next slide. But how do you become a pope? You need to do a lot of social work, you need to do a lot of social climbing. It is a political position and you need to do a lot of politics in order to get to it. But I'll go through there are 400,000 priests. It's easier than ever to go through that process and like get a parish and like oversee a chapel. You do boring shit like being the pillar of your community and a person that everyone goes to for like telling all their deepest secrets and relying on and trusting and stuff for like how they run their lives. But seminaries have all sorts of different master's and doctorate programs for different positions within ministries and stuff. Doctorate of Divinity is what you're going to want if you want to become pope. There are 3 trivial caveats. You need to be celibate forever. You need to be unmarried forever. You need to be male, but next slide. All of those are easier than ever. Sex is down. Next slide. Marriage is down. Next slide. Transgender identities are higher than ever. Next slide. Next you have to be a bishop. You get a cathedral. A cathedral is in charge of all the little chapels. You oversee a bunch of chapels. You have all these little priests running around. They don't look like that, you look like that. They look like priests. And they're making a list of other people that could be bishops and checking it twice. Every single 2 or 3 years, they update their list of like, of all the active priests, who could become a bishop? And they're going through all these like behind the scenes processes of like, once a diocese gets, like, someone dies, someone needs to fill up that position. There's a static amount of these, like proportional to how many dioceses there are. Next slide. The person in charge of deciding who becomes a bishop is this diva. He's an apostolic nuncio. He kind of has this like page boy color scheme where like they make the little boy who runs around and does all the errands like a little bit brighter. He collects all the lists. He talks to all the bishops in their lists, and he like looks into all the people that could become bishops. There are like a couple thousand bishops, but only a couple openings of bishops every single year. Like 100, 200, 300, whatever. So that's something that one or a couple guys can do. They talk to all the bishops and they collect candidates for like who can be a bishop next. Pope has veto power, but he's the one that runs around. And I just think he's so weird. It's such a nice color. Nice one. What you can also be is an archbishop, which is, if there's an archdiocese, usually like a large metropolitan area, diocese needs to be split up into like multiple smaller dioceses. Like in Los Angeles, we have 5 pastoral regions under one archbishop, Archbishop Gomez, and we have Elshoff, which is like in charge of us. Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels is like our cathedral in our diocese, just from where we are, because it runs from East Hollywood all the way up to like over to Malibu. Bishop Baruth is in charge of like San Fernando pastoral region. Bishop Trudeau, San Pedro, Shredka, Santa Barbara. This guy Bishop Nunes just became the Santa Gabriel guy because the last one got shot in his home in 2023 for like no reason.
He might be a saint though.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. But he wasn't killed for his faith. Is the problem. It was just a random crazy guy. So if someone's gonna kill you and you want to become a saint, make sure they hate you for your faith. Yeah, so we have 5, and this is what it looks like, and that's our chapel. Then you become a cardinal. This is something that you get entrusted to by the Pope directly. It's a papal distinction given to you by the Pope. You stay a bishop, but it's like you're then in charge also of running the conclave and being these trusted advisors for the Pope. No special title, you don't really get upgraded or whatever. I just thought this was awesome. Most of what they do is vote for popes, and there's this interesting thing where like ever since the Reformations in the 70s, it used to be anyone who was anointed a cardinal could vote, but now you have to be under 80. So that's that 127. So all of these guys are like too old to be considered like young enough to be electing the new pope, which I think is like honestly very, very progressive in the reason that we have popes like St. Francis or wow, popes like Pope Francis. But you never know. Probably soon. Continue. And then when the Pope dies, or the Pope, like Pope Benedict did for the first time any Pope has done so in like 600 years, steps down from the position of the papacy and becomes a Pope Emeritus. First time that happened in 600 years, it happened in 2013. Really crazy stuff, but also probably related to like how visible decline of age is among powerful people now compared to in the past. Like your image gets reproduced, and like there's a lot of kind of implications for what it says about this institution of 1 billion people that you're shepherding if you're visibly in decline. We saw it happen to like Joe Biden, who like for all sorts of reasons like wasn't capable of like being a strong debate performer or whatever, but people decided he was senile because he was no longer like a 50-year-old guy who's like spry enough to like be a real zinger in a debate or whatever. So this was him as Pope Emeritus, which is like he's the first, like it's the first time that we've had that title given in English in America. But fortunately, when a pope dies or leaves, we have a whole way to like deal with that. It's called it's the conclave. Voting eligible bishops, they sequester, they kick out all the outsiders except nurses, because even though no one's 80, everyone's still old as fuck. This guy, the dean of the College of Cardinals, the current active dean of the college is Ralph Fiennes. The conclaves can take weeks, and the cardinals are supposed to not make any meaningful changes to the structure of the Catholic Church while there's no pope. There's a series of like written voting on slips of paper. Votes are signed and sealed. There are like 3 different groups of people that are like randomly assigned every single day, and it's like chosen at random. And there's 3 scrutineers, 3 infirmers, 3 advisors, and they like take the votes in different places and they tabulate together. It's all about just like having a bunch of people in the same place so that no one does anything shifty. Has to be a supermajority of 2/3, and if after a round of voting there's no supermajority, they burn all of the votes on pieces of paper, and it's black. And this is the chemical like recipe for the blacksmith that they use. I don't know how they used to do it, but this is how they do it now. And then if it reaches the 2/3, there's a new pope. White smoke issues, and this is what it's made out of. And then there's a pope. And now we have a pope. He's called the Bishop of Rome, the Vicar of Jesus Christ, the successor of the Prince of Apostles, the Supreme Pontiff of the Universal Church, the Patriarch of the West, the Primate of Italy, the Archbishop of and Metropolitan of the Roman Province, Sovereign of the Vatican City-State, Servant of the servants of God. He's referred to as Your Holiness and Holy Father. He's the Bishop of Rome. He's the Supreme Pontifex. He's Pontifex. He's Pontifex Maximus. He's Instagram.com/Pontifex. And you got a new one. Yeah, shut up. But there are other ways. You can declare the sitting pope as not the pope. There are all sorts of reasons that this has happened. There was a great Western schism where the papacy, due to like pressure from like the King of France, moved to Avignon because like France tried to impose a bunch of taxes on Rome, and then Rome was like, fuck that, like we're above all rulers. And then like they tried to like attack Rome, and then that pope died, not because of the attack, but he died right after. And his successor was like, fuck that, I'm going to Avignon. So he like went to France basically for safety. There were like a series of 8 popes, and then Rome got so sick of like there being popes in France that the cardinals in Rome elected their own pope, and then there were 2 popes, but then they declared that pope invalid because there were so many people outside of the Vatican who were like, they like wanted a Roman pope so badly, like specifically Roman on like the nationalist type of tempo, and they declared that false too because there were all of these different people So the reason for this schism, the Western schism, it's not like the Orthodox people like moving to the east. It's like 2 different popes. One was in Avignon, one was in Rome, and then click it. And then they came up with a 3rd pope in Pisa, and then for like a couple years there were 3 popes that all said that they were like the pope. And then eventually like they both succeeded to the Avignon guy, and the Avignon guy moved back to city. And then when you're pope, you choose a pope name. The precedent is to like name yourself after a previous pope, like so as not to like solidify your name or whatever name you pick into the history books or whatever. You want to choose someone that like came before you. People use it to like signal the new direction of like where they're going. There's all this kind of importance that people put into episcopal genealogies. So like for every single pope back to like the 16th, 15th century, every single pope was either elected as a bishop or as a cardinal by some pope previous. And you can like trace all of these genealogies of like who came first, which is really cool. Pope Francis was the first Franciscan member of the Franciscan order to become a pope, and so he named himself Pope Francis, kind of as a sign of unity between the Franciscans and the Catholic Church, where there was some discord for a while, power struggles, very small. Pope Saint John Paul II named himself after John Paul I, who named himself after the person who made John Paul I a bishop and the person who made John Paul I a cardinal, respectively. That was John the 23rd and Paul VI. So like they kind of mutate like the chemical compounds and become increasingly more complicated over time. But it's an important thing to like who you come from and what you're signaling that you're coming after, because there's this origin in the original apostles, the 12 apostles of Christ or whatever, that the Catholic Church says that they're like direct descendants of. So if you're seeking popehood, befriend the cardinals, so the people that's going to make you pope. If you want to be a saint, befriend the laity so they can pray for you, and the bishops so that they can like actually start the cause for you to be a saint. If you're a pope seeking sainthood, you make more cardinals. So that's what Pope Francis, he was like made a cardinal by John Paul II. Pope Francis made him a saint after he died. Or make powerful enemies, because they'll kill you and then they make you a martyr. If you're a saint seeking popehood, it's a miracle because you're dead, so you probably shouldn't be a pope. But so there's no way that you can become a pope if you're already a saint. But if you're a pope, you can lose your popehood. Next slide. This guy got dug out. Pope Stephen VI was so vindictive, he dug up a pope 2 popes ago. Pope something they served between them, but he dug him up. He put him on trial. He made the very unwise decision to represent himself. He was charged with perjury and naturally found guilty. Because, like, fucking look at him. He looks guilty. But, like, that's the thing about popes is, like, popes are disgraced all the time. And it comes out that popes did all sorts of fucked up shit because they're, like, actors upon the world. And they can be corrupt and, like, do all sorts of deceitful shit and actually become pope because that's how that stuff works. So, you know, you kind of... If you're a pope, you feel like you have to like uphold the sanctity of your position because the guy 2 popes before you was a total sleazebag. You gotta de-pope him. So there is no Pope Formosus. There's just Formosus because he was formerly the pope and now he's Pope Formal. Next slide. So Pascal's wager is this idea that this guy Pascal, he was like a logician and a philosopher and a thinker, a smart guy, and he was just like, if you believe in... It's like rational for a person to try to believe in God or to believe in God, because if you believe in God, either he exists and you go to heaven, or he doesn't and nothing happens. Or if you don't believe in God, you get damned if God exists, and you get damned by non-existence if he doesn't. Damned if you do, damned if he doesn't. But what I came up with is a different formation of this. Next slide. About the pros and cons of becoming a pope and becoming a saint. In life, if you become a pope, you get luxury, you get power, but you're also burdened by like politics. You can actually speak through God while you're alive, and you're the only person who gets to speak ex cathedra while you're alive and like say these official decrees and have God speak through you. You're the big dog in life. You're agentic upon the world. But if you die in death, you're buried in Rome, but nothing happens in heaven because there's no heaven, because there's just void. Your reputation is contingent on what you did and how people interpreted afterlife. But in paradise, you get like, you're probably a tenant in heaven, if God exists and you're a pope, but like, if you do some fucked up shit that no one knows about, you're just a person. There's like still accountability there. So, and popehood's revocable. It happened once, but it could happen again if you fuck up again. If you're a saint, life is dedication to certain charity and moral kind of aims or goals. It's a lot of sacrifice, martyrdom often, and you're dedicating your life to virtues. And in death, even if nothing happens, you're still remembered as someone who trod the same ground that a billion Catholic adherents are also experiencing, and your life is much similar to theirs than your life ever was to a Pope's. And so there is that kind of emotional connection that other people have, and in rememoration of you, depending on what you have, a patronhood of people who are like really into coffee. They can look at whoever the patron saint of coffee is and be like, oh, yeah, this guy knew it, and he also like was a little bit better than me, which is really cool. But if it's in paradise, you're 100% in heaven. So like long term, this is probably the way to go. Permanent patronhood of earthly minutia, like you still get the patronhood of like a random thing. Like you could be the god. Oh, no. Next. I wanted to talk about a couple different saints that are like currently, it's October 25th, so what we're on is St. Crispin's Day. It's these two twin guys that were like in the 3rd century living in Gaul, and they were doing a lot of charity stuff, and they were leather workers and artisans and like lace makers. They were too holy and like sweet and good to people, bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
But they got sentenced to what's called a river ordeal, where you just get tied to a river, and like if you drown, you're like saved, but if you die, you're the devil or whatever. So it's like let the river decide. And then they survive and get beheaded anyway by the king of Gaul, which is unfair, but you get to be a saint afterwards, so it's fine. The most recent saint is this guy Carlo Acutis. He died in 2006 when he was 15 of cancer. He's the only saint to have ever played Halo, only saint to have ever loved playing Halo. He made like a website about how good Jesus is. There's this big thing. They're making a video game about him called the Acutis game. It's in the metaverse. It's going to be so fucking bad. But his attributes are the red polo shirt that he's wearing in this one specific photo of him. The monstrance, which is like a kind of elaborate goblet used in mass for certain things, and a computer, naturally. The 2 miracles that he did was just like this Brazilian boy was born with like a fucked up pancreas, but it healed, and like no one knew why it was healed. But he had prayed to Carlo, who was blessed at this time, so prayable too, because Carlo's family lived in Italy. He's like an Italian guy, so there's so much closeness to like, if there's a bunch of people who loved him and knew how holy he was in life, they can like do a campaign for him, super grassroots shit, in and around the Vatican, for being like, venerate my kid, bless my kid, make my kid a saint. And they succeeded. So this kid's parents are still alive, and their son is a saint, which is a really absurd thing. And it's also really absurd to see, I don't know, we're not used to seeing tech and modern aesthetics kind of co-opted into this sort of thing. Being told that a kid that played Halo was a saint is a really weird thing in the modern day, because it makes us synthesize like our understanding of like religious possibility in the present with the religious possibility of like the Catholic Church, which is the institution. I just think it's really interesting. What's up?
You said he passed from cancer?
Yeah.
So where's the martyrization?
He wasn't a martyr.
Oh.
You can be a martyr, or you can be what's called a confessor. I'm sorry that I didn't make that clear enough in the slides, but a confessor is a person who just like confess their faith and live their life in like profession of that faith or whatever.
You gotta just have miracles, I guess.
Yeah. You have a question?
I was gonna say the same exact thing.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily have to be a martyr. In the modern day, since people aren't really being killed all that often for being Catholic, like it's mostly confessors that are becoming saints nowadays. It's like recently dead people. But yeah. gonna go over a couple other saints that I think are like super interesting. This is the patron saint of ice skaters. She was bedridden for all of her life. She died at 15. Or wow, no, she was injured ice skating at 15 and died at 50. And she spent like those 35 years of her life reportedly being like super charitable, from dead or something. They signed, like the people in her hometown all got together and signed this like affidavit of testimony that her diet was like a bit of apple, a bit of date, and watered down wine. That she shed skin, bones, and parts of her intestines, which her parents kept in a vase and gave off a sweet odor. That's called the odor sanctorum. That's a real thing. They say that it comes from the stigmata, the like 4 or 5 holes that Christ had on like each of his palms, both of his toes, and like in his heart. So there's some like tie-in here of like the fact that her body parts that fell off and which were stored in a vase gave off a sweet odor. They were like from Jesus. So this is a depiction of Christ coming and like giving her the stigmata because she was so holy. Yeah, so some people say that this like odor sanctorum is like acetone that like the body produces like when they fast too much and the body is so like whatever, I don't know. But apparently she was very charitable. So
Did they consider the odor sanctorum as a miracle? Even though now we
it's
know
an
why.
evident. There are a couple others that I'm gonna go over also of just like what are things that a saint does that are proof that they're a saint. And it's kind of ways that they look and things that they bear on their bodies and things they can do. So I'll go, I think this is another one. Signs of the stigmata. This guy, Padre Pio, he just like had the stigmata on his hands. And I think naturally, apparently he always had them. Or they appeared one day, which I believe less, because I'm like probably just put them on. But apparently he had bilocation, which means he could be like seen in 2 different places at the same time. So that's like, I don't know, if I was a saint, I would want to have bilocation. I hope I have it.
You just made an agreement with this tone.
Yeah. You just like have to get these cigarette burns in the same place.
How long ago was
That was a 18th century dude.
that?
Yeah. This is Saint Droga. This poor fucking guy. Can you see the things that he's like the patron saint of? He also had bilocation, so he was seen. There was this crazy thing where he was seen in the fields while also being seen in
He's my patron saint for like 5 things.
Yeah.
Coffee house cheers.
Yeah. Coffee house owners.
How insane. Wait.
So he got a hernia, and he became what's called an anchorite, which means he like lodges himself in the church because he can't go to No, go back. He had a hernia. He like became what's called an anchorite, which means he's like lodged in place, and he just like stays in the basement in the church. But apparently he like built a little hut on the side of the chapel for him to go to with like room for him to get into the chapel and like get communion every Sunday or whatever. So he was very holy and so far as he just like lived by begging and he just like stayed there. And he became a saint, and he could be seen in 2 places, the field and the chapel, at the same time. Imagine.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
No, you shouldn't. How do they pick like all the things that they're like a saint of? Like, did someone go after and be like, yeah, this guy's unattractive, like?
He probably was. The people in charge of
Most
the Inquisition of is a saint. He's just there. He's just in the chapel. He's just there. Like he's not going to the barber.
Yeah.
But the people write what's called before a hagiograph, they write the biography and they like look into his life. Go back. They thank you. They like talk to all the people that knew him. If he's like implanted like a tumor into the chapel, people probably saw him a lot, and they saw he like never did anything wrong. He could be seen in 2 places or whatever. So he was probably super ugly because whoever wrote all of the stuff about like was this person a saint and did all that inquiry. We went to at one point like early on in like Blessed or whatever. We talked about the person who's in charge, the filtre of just like, is this person holy? That's the person who's doing all of the inquiry. So he's asking like, was he how ugly was he? Was he like patron level ugly?
Was he ruptured? Did he have ruptures in his life? A lot of ruptures?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a tough break.
Cooper, who did a lecture last time, he saw this, like, me tweet this entire list, and he was like, which one am I? And I said, ruptures. Any questions?
Dude, I would not want to. A Fleury sur Loire?
That's just a city. That's a city with 200
Would not,
people.
would
It's
not,
a commune.
would not want to. That's the worst one on there.
Imagine how they're probably pretty fucking ugly. but next slide. Mary was a peach. Mary was what was called a grazing saint, so she spent most of her holy time just like in it. Does anyone here know Mary of Egypt? Mary of Egypt, she is so cool. Mary of Egypt made her living as a beggar and a flax spinner, but she also like slept with a bunch of people and they'd like pay her for her sexual favors, and she'd be like, no, I just like love this too much. She was overcome by quote an insatiable and irrepressible passion. She went on an anti-pilgrimage to Bethlehem because the idea of like paying for her pilgrimage by like selling sexual favors to the pilgrims was like this sick sexual desire that she had of just like some sort of wanting that. I don't know. But this is also like, again, in retrospect, it's how people are biographizing her. So like, this is how a person who like, if a woman enjoys having sex, this is how she's depicted as like this person who's like overcome for desire for sin or whatever. But what she does is she goes on this anti-pilgrimage to Bethlehem. She's like, oh, look how bad I'm being. And then she walks into the Holy Sepulchre and she hears a voice saying like, don't go forth. You're like not prepared for this, or like you're not pure enough for this, you don't belong here. And she's like, oh fuck. So she goes to the River Jordan and she goes to the Church of John the Baptist, and there she receives like her absolution and communion and stuff like that. And then she just goes wandering in the desert for like a super long time. And when she runs into this other saint, Zosimus of Palestine, she supposedly was like completely naked and quote unrecognizable as human. She'd been like out there for a long time, kind of starving and making a living. And what she says to him is like, meet me on Holy Thursday in a year, here by the river, and give me communion. And he's some sort of clergyman, so he like of course he's gonna show up, and he like runs into her along the River Jordan, and she gives her communion. And then they part, and then a year later he goes back to the same place, and she's there dead. And there's a sign inscripted by her body saying, I died a year ago, right after you gave me communion. And that's another attribute that saints have, where they have these incorrupt bodies that don't decay. But she has this like, it was supposedly that like, I died right after I received communion and I went to heaven, and that was one of her miracles. And then a lion helped him bury the body. That's real. So Saint Mary of Egypt, it's interesting to consider these things in retrospect about how sexual autonomy is, first of all, made out to be like this rabid, sinful deed, and also pathologized as just like being some sort of instrument of the devil. And obviously, with every single one of these canonizations and venerations and whatever, the traits that they're being lauded for are as much indicative of like whatever virtues they were capable of in life as like the specific moral prescriptions of what the Catholic Church itself as an institution and as a moral censuring body considers holy. So I think she's an incredible saint. I think she's one of my favorites.
Well, so grazing, like.
Yeah, a grazing saint are just like basically kind of wanderers.
Okay.
So,
I was gonna say, like, what is she, a
it's a
ruminant?
very-
Like, she, like...
yeah, it's a very like animalistic sort of term, but I think there's a Latin word that doesn't have that connotation that grazing comes from. Just so sick. Hildegard of Bingen. I know. She's like one of the coolest saints ever. She had a bunch of mystical visions. She was a theologian, a biologist, a botanist, a seer, a composer, a philosopher. You could go to the music library at UCLA, you'd see a bunch of her compositions, like more monophony of like hers that she wrote in the medieval ages survives than like of any other composer. She had all of these like long drawn out religious texts that she wrote about philosophy and like existence, and there's a bunch of wonderful illuminations that describe these psychedelic visions that she really explains in incredibly deliberate detail. And then I've read like selected works of hers. Her most known work is Scivias, which is kind of like this long collection of these visions that she has, and she says that she can hold them very straight and steadily in her mind, and it's not like this ecstatic vision that she has where she's possessed by someone and she's like, oh my god, there's this fear of fire and there's this fear of air or whatever. We can go to the second slide just to talk about this a little more. These are illustrations of like specific geometrical visions that she describes and says that she has always been able to see. And I think that it's really incredible that through the language of theology and philosophy, with the blessing of the Catholic Church, one person who lived as we lived 1,000 years ago was able to describe in great detail the way that she made sense of the world, and that these vivid inscriptions of like exactly what she saw, and it would be like this, of just like there's a concentric sphere and there's 6 concentric spheres and there's like a beam of light or a shaft of light like going down the middle, and Christ like protrudes this way and whatever, and the way that she runs it in her books, she'll describe these psychedelic visions that involve a lot of concentric circles and the movement and texture and color of different what they're made of different components in this vision, and then she'll explain the very minute and erudite theological implications of that vision that she's described. It's really an incredible read if you read any of her stuff. But she was one of the only women in her time with the Pope's direct blessing to lecture on theological matters, and she did so, and she published a lot of these works, and she was so good at just being like, it's not through my wisdom as a woman, as a mere woman, that I know these things. She was kind of playing the game a little bit. She knew she was the shit, but the way that she did it, it allowed her to talk about all of these things about how she saw the world, and she made a lot of really incredible music that still survives, and people are still doing renditions of it today. People do all sorts of insane psychedelic drawings inspired by the manner in which she had composed her. Like, there are these weird paintings that I forget who did them, but they're synthesizings of her theological visions and her musical practice, and the musical notes like bend about in strange ways. It's like album covers for specific works of hers. They have them. It's really interesting.
Were there like contemporary drawings too?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. This is kind of the section where I'm talking about specific saints, and obviously I have to do Joan because she's sort of this titular saint, and she's everything about saints that people like are like, oh, what the fuck, this is a person who's better than me in every single way. And there are these ideas that like she was this poster child of an entire nation and its fight for like political and religious freedom or whatever, when the Anglicans like had control of France, and she was a nation's hero, and she was like really rigidly, like obnoxiously moral. She was very dogmatically faithful. Hierophantic, she like had these visions that she said she had, and she was brave, and she was like apparently instrumental in certain like bold pushes, and there are all these rundowns that are well attested about like to what extent she urged the other generals to like go forth and go on this attack. I didn't really pay attention. My eyes glazed over that part of it.
She was a flag?
I mean that kind of symbolically, just like she was the flag for an entire nation. She was this epitomized ideal. She was prophesied. Merlin said that like, oh, a woman would destroy France, but a virgin would restore it. And obviously there's these ideas about the purity of virginal identities and all of the things that, like the fraught things that have to do with patriarchy, deal with that. I don't know. I think she's really incredible. Anyone does. And she represents all of these things that are a little bit above what we think ourselves capable of doing. And she was more magnetic and more glowing to people than we might be. And we're fascinated when we see how she struggled and suffered, and when she's under trial and it's this totally trumped up trial that they're leveling against her when she's captured and she's sentenced to death. You see her suffering, and all of it is recorded in legal documents. This is like the most compelling thing to us about martyrs, is that there are people that suffered and who stayed strong, and like there are all these plays and movies that are directly based on her life and directly based on like the legal proceedings that ensued when she was captured and then eventually sentenced to death. Bernard Shaw, who wrote this play about her based on the legal proceedings of her. She was the most notable warrior saint in the Catholic calendar and the queerest fish among the eccentric worthies of the Middle Ages. So everything that's like fascinating and tragic about saints is tragic about her, and everything that is, I don't know, titillating about it is there. So she's just the saint that we think that we'd like to be, I think, most of the time. But also this movie, Passion of Joan of Arc, like the passion of Christ means the suffering of Christ, or the unbearable ecstasy of suffering before death. And we're so heartbroken, like retelling these stories of these people who like believed very purely in a certain moral ideal that we may or may not believe in. I'd like to go to the next saint. It's the martyr saint Maria Goretti, patron saint of clemency. She died at 11 years old. Her 20-year-old brother made advances on her, and she rejected him, and he stabbed her to death 20 times. And when she died forgiving him, and it's baffling for us to really even try to contend with now, because it's a level of this virtue, whether we believe it good or bad, of forgiveness that is far and beyond what we think that we'd ever want or would hope we'd have to ever consider making. And when she's depicted, she kind of holds her hand because she wasn't given her first communion, and she holds the palm that martyrs hold when they're depicted in hagiographical paintings. Her brother joined a ministry or whatever, and there's no like patching what happened at this like very microcosmic level of like a tragedy that happened in a life. And it's interesting to kind of turn over in your head, like, what does it mean when such a large institution venerates like something so horrible on this microcosm of like an individual family? And it's not something that I say like, obviously this is a person who, like Joan and like so many other saints, shouldn't have had to die. Obviously Carlos Oquida's like, we think it's so interesting that he played video games, but that's just because he died of cancer at 15, and we think it's horrible. And did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if the martyrdom is specific, or like the sainthood, is specifically because she forgave him, or also because like
she was holy in love, and so she's considered a virgin saint,
of course.
And that's obviously so tied up in all these different things about like the Catholic veneration of virginity and chastity. And there are all sorts of, like, I'm not gonna say that the way that the Catholic Church treats that is like, I don't know, progressive or right in any capacity. I'm not trying to sell you on that. But I think we make people saints sometimes to apologize to them. It's like for like the way that the world is, and people who have passed on and have, if you're a Catholic, you want to like assure everyone else who like sacrifices their life in this like religious pursuit and practice that like it's going to be okay in the end. So we make ourselves feel better in certain ways by saying like this person is in heaven now. And we know for certain this person is in heaven because they lived well. it's a way of rectifying the things that we see as wrong and unfair in the world in a way that a lot of religion is, of just like making sense of the senseless. And sainthood as an institution is sort of an elaboration and continuation of that. Your death is a moral lesson. If you die in a way that is deemed by the Catholic Church venerable, the way that you lived your life is taught as a lesson. And in life, if you're suffering, you may feel all sorts of ways about that. If you in life knew that you were going to be a saint, everything you feel would be a prescription for anyone who like follows after you. Any kind of suffering or confusion or evil you do. But it becomes like a pantheon of heroes that we idolize, and a saint, again, is so much closer to the way that we live our life than any pope is, because of their positionality as they live. And a saint is just a declaration of all sorts of things that the Catholic Church has deemed moral and valuable and virtuous, and there are all sorts of problems that people can find with like what that is and what that looks like. But it's our way of like collecting, I think, a list of people to model ourselves out off of. And it also, since saints are so object specific and they live the minutiae of specific lives, they have what we call patronage over specific things, but they're actually just like the objects that you used or had some relationship to in your life that defined your life. And now afterwards, those are things that people choose to depict you with, and as they come across those things, they look to you, and they look to the stories that people tell about you. And I think that there is value in that. And it's also fun to like look into this like meta paganism that's done when there's every single object that you come across in the world. There's probably some sort of patron saint of lamps. Now there's a patron saint of computers. It's Carlo. There's he's I think computers, because his thing was he made a website of like Jesus's. So, and a lot of his like papal depictions that would be put on votive candles or little prayer cards, he's holding a little laptop. And it's interesting. They're trying to call him God's influencer and bullshit like that. And it's like a modernization thing. But even that rings flat, because we know he's just like a person that interfaced with objects that we're interfacing with now. And people in charge of the Catholic Church and its system of saints decided that he lived a perfect life, and we can look to that and just decide